scientists in California have created energy with nuclear fusion. This is not a nuclear power plant. Come out. It's not a nuclear power plant that comes from a factory. It's something completely different. Here's how Financial Times describes it from the information that came out of Lawrence Livermore Labs. So it's like this little chamber. Inside the chamber is a fuel capsule, and inside there is a layer of deuterium tritium fuel. And then basically they shoot up to 192 laser beams. Freaking laser beams. I had to. And they heat it and create a hot plasma and a gas stripped of electrons. And then the reaction is, the heat spreads rapidly enough through the fuel. And then this is known as ignition, which creates energy. Okay. So that is a very crude explanation of shooting lasers at a man-made little baby sun in order to create an ignition. That
she's not a scientist, but she plays one on television.
Yes,
but she did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
This is a crude explanation, but you get it. It's not like nuclear power where you merge what?
Yeah.
Yes, it's completely different. It's a different thing. They say that there's no nuclear waste like there is when you have nuclear power. And it is a small to big type energy production, as in energy inside of a glass of water could power an entire city, theoretically. Now, the elements needed here are not uranium, which is needed for nuclear power plants, but rather a form of hydrogen called deuterium tritium. We just talked about it. This is the thing we, though, really need to understand, because at this point in geopolitics, we have to ask, where does it come from? Because right now we are suffering from sanctions on Russia and Venezuela because the United States doesn't like those places and doesn't want us to get oil from there, but we are still dependent on oil for energy. So nuclear is another option, but nuclear power plants require enriched uranium. Darn, that comes from Russia too. So when we see something like this, because of the world we live in right now, we have to ask ourselves, okay, but where do we get the materials? Because, when people are saying this will cure our geopolitical ails because it means that we can make our own tiny little power that powers a whole city, and you have to ask yourself, how? Where do we get those things?
Right.
So is it like the movie Back to the Future where you can just get
some plutonium from some Iranians?
He says, in 1985, can you get plutonium from the corner store, right? When he goes back? No. Actually, no. And this is not plutonium, so don't get confused. The deuterium tritium is two elements. Deuterium comes from seawater. That is readily available. The tritium part is not. You need lithium to create it. Where does lithium come from? China and South America.
Of course.
So why not in the United States? Well, here's why. From the Institute for Energy Research, the Biden climate tax bill, the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, was passed in August, and it provides incentives and subsidies for car buyers and automakers. To qualify for the subsidies, which are worth over $10,000 per vehicle, battery makers must use raw materials from North America or a country with which the United States has a trade agreement. That presents a dilemma. Despite dozens of potential lithium mines in the United States and Canada, most projects are in various stages of development and many are years away from production, particularly with environmental lawsuits delaying developments due to multiple points of entry points for litigation in U.S. regulatory law. So many of these mines need to raise billions of investment dollars plus free themselves of litigation without any guarantee that they will ever yield enough lithium to meet North America's needs. Now, this was about lithium for EV batteries. Lithium for this type of power, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to be ready in time for us to move to any kind of new, type of power. But okay, suppose the US and other countries do get its lithium stores up and running. Is this kind of energy actually ready for prime time to solve our energy needs? Well, big potential, but not ready for prime time for these reasons. Listen to Reuters' report on this.
A potentially major scientific breakthrough in fusion energy that could one day provide a cheap source of electricity. According to two sources with knowledge of the matter, scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, for the first time ever, have produced a nuclear fusion reaction resulting in a net energy gain in an experiment using lasers. Fusion works when nuclei of two atoms are subjected to extreme heat of more than 100 million degrees Celsius or 180 million degrees Fahrenheit, causing them to fuse into a new larger atom, giving off enormous amounts of energy, the same process that powers the sun and stars. But the process consumes vast amounts of energy, and the trick has been to make the process self-sustaining and to get more energy out than goes in, and to do so continuously instead of brief moments.
Okay, so a couple of problems here. They can't have it continuous. They cannot harness it yet. All they are saying is that they can get more energy out of it that they put into it, about 120% more. They put in 2.1 megajoules of power. They got out 2.5. But again, they weren't able to harness it and then like put it into your lamp. It's just not there yet.
Can I just be a conspiracy theorist actually not a conspiracy theorist for a moment? And Philip, maybe you can even jump in on this from your vast lab experience. And I know you're a fan of particle physics and as well.
Yeah.
So we've been hearing about this for years. And of course, I have a big special redacted history video that's coming out soon on this free energy sourcing that the government has kept from us for years. It's public. It's been suppressed, and they don't want, because if these large companies can't make money off of this, if it's free energy, they're done. I mean, they're out of business. The fact that Nikola Tesla was rounded up and all of his stuff was stolen by the federal government, they don't give us free energy. So the idea that this free energy source is going to be readily available, I've seen reports today saying that the only reason we're even hearing about this suddenly is because other nations were about to make this announcement and we wanted to be the first to make the announcement.
Yes, in fact, take a look at the next screen. Japan says that they are actively competing to succeed with nuclear fusion. In September, their minister in charge of science and technology said, "We are no longer in an era of cooperation, but an era of competition. We will further discuss the matter to draft a strategy while following the moves by other countries." So they are not working with anybody else. They want to have this immediately.
100 years ago, we had the technology where we could literally have free energy that could travel 26 miles without copper wires. And we have this technology that's been suppressed since the 1970s, nuclear fusion.
Well, and I've always wondered myself, like I always think about electric vehicles, how they are. Like in our old vehicles, we had an alternator that when the engine was running, it would turn and it would power the battery, right? It would send power back. Why can't they generate that in electric cars when the wheels spin? Like I always thought, if it's the same concept, the wheels could spin and charge the battery, but it's not. So it's like, I feel like they have intentionally made it so you have to be dependent on a grid of some kind that they control.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because how else will they control us? This is the point, right? These are how these globalists control us. How will they control us if it's all free and we have etheric energy exists around us? This was already being harnessed back well over 100 years ago. Again, I have a whole deep report coming out on this that we've been working very hard on here as part of our new Redacted History series.
Right. Think about how
free.
Affordable energy could really change people's lives. Make it so people are not freezing this winter. Make it so there's no heat-related deaths. Make it so there's a million ways that, yes, this would be better for more than just, our electric toothbrushes, but actual poor people's lives.
Right, and they seem to always be focused on climate change. Like, what is better for the climate than us being energy grid independent?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
We keep saying our reliance on foreign fossil fuels and all of this stuff. We got to be independent, energy independent. But what does that mean? It means dependent on their control. Not you get to be independent, like where you and your house are totally free of like any grid or anything. No, they need to make sure that they're making money off of you.
And as long as there is a component needed in order to create this reaction that we don't mine or harness, then it does not clear up geopolitics at all. Japan is saying they're going to have a reactor for this in place by middle of this century. But as you can see, it's clearly not ready for prime time. So in the meantime, we still have fossil fuel related energy, unless you're in Sweden. Now, Sweden is saying that it will return to nuclear power. The Swedish Minister for Foreign Affairs, Tobias Billström, I'm not exactly sure how you say with the O with the two. Is it an umlaut?
Where do I see this? I don't even see his name.
Tobias.
Yeah, I think it's Strom.
Yeah, Bill Strom.
Okay.
Bill Strom.
He says that Sweden must build more nuclear plants as a tool to create energy independence in Europe because Sweden is suffering. Take a look at this Bloomberg headline today. Sweden's free-falling property market triggers worst economic slump in the EU. So largely due to economic sanctions, they just cannot continue to circle the drain. And we see politicians, some who continue to say, well, the planet, we don't want this. And then some who say, I can't let my people suffer. We're going to nuclear. And I applaud this move. But while we still do have gas-powered energy, today, the EU says it's working on a carbon tax. That means importers will pay a tax on what they sell inside the EU based on greenhouse gas emissions. And many importers are saying they don't like this because it will drive up prices for them. And those price hikes, they will pass on to us, the consumers, so goods will get more expensive. But this is something that climate researchers like Bjorn Lundberg actually say is a good idea, only if, he says, all countries get on the same level of taxation, which... Is that going to happen? Here's what he says. He says, by this carbon tax, we can most effectively reduce the damages from climate by just having one carbon tax across all countries and goods. That way, producers can't just shift their emissions to a factory in another country, and then everyone faces the same costs. But the next screen here, he says, what are the chances that we actually get to one carbon tax? He says the second sentence, chances are basically zero. That there will be one uniform, steadily increasing global carbon tax, carefully coordinated amongst China, India, the United States, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the EU. So, if we just see the real world muddling through with some countries setting carbon taxes too high, others setting them too low, all adjusting them up and down according to local events and political pressures, that means that any actual carbon tax will become much more expensive than the theoretically pure model with a single global carbon tax. So nice that the European Union is doing this, but they cannot do it in a vacuum. And if they do, then it's going to be like another sanctions on consumers. So, geopolitically speaking, we're not in a great place right now when it comes to energy.
No, and also the United States being hit with massive storms. Let us know how many of you are in the United States right now watching. I know we have viewers all over the world, but if you're in the United States, horrible storms, big snowstorms, of course, sweeping from the West Coast to the East Coast. There's tens of thousands of people without power in California. You guys were without power, I think, in Portland, up in that neck of the woods. And then it's going to go all the way across the country, deep freeze. And of course, this comes at a time when we've had 106 attacks on our power grid in the United States over the past 8 months. So, we're like literally teetering on the brink of destruction here with this power grid situation right now.
Yeah.
All man-made. This is an all man-made crisis. So when you hear your newscasters talking about this shit, it's all man-made. It's because of your politicians.
Yeah. Maybe Philip, can you see this super chat from Chris Beatty about being a nuclear engineer? I'll read it to you, and then maybe can you try and explain?
Yeah, I can see it. It says, excuse me, I've got a cough real quick.
I can read it and then you explain. The problem with conventional fusion approaches is that high energy neutrons will destroy the reactor skin in a matter of hours. Does that mean the actual reactor that's built and something about the neutrons destroys the machinery? Is that what?
Problem with conventional fusion.
So, I mean, I don't know 100% because I'm not a nuclear engineer. I was a molecular biology major, but I do like so. Basically, you like what makes deuterium and tritium is the there's extra neutrons in a hydrogen molecule, so it's an isotope. So like deuterium has two neutrons, one proton, one electron. So the way that I'm not really sure of the process of fusion. So but it sounds like because I know one of them is a radioactive isotope, it will like fire off neutrons. To the best of my understanding, and so that could be what he's referring to as it will actually destroy the equipment
machinery
itself that houses it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barth in our chat says Barth Northeast says UK is cold like it's always been in winter. Others are saying and Caltrans. Was it Caltrans? Is that the name of it or Cal?
Caltrans is like BART.
No. PG&E. So JG says yes. PG&E shut power off for about 4 hours today in Napa, California. Yeah, it's all over the place. We're seeing these things here. Maurice, nice to see you from the Philippines. So, Yeah, I mean, again, I come back to this point, and Natalie did a great job of breaking this down, but there's been a suppression of this technology for decades. We've had it. They've been keeping it from us because they don't want us to have free energy. They want us to be relying on these and us to pay for it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at Redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to Redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.